Weed. It's a drug. It's everywhere. It's on every gas station corner, assuming your state isn't frozen in the past. It's socially acceptable. One might even say it's a budding industry that's high on success. However, what do we really know about it? I mean, the plant itself, I mean. How old are these organisms? Have they always been psychoactive? What have they seen to get to the point where our species could cultivate them into the super-THC-rich GMOs we have with us today? Happy 420, everyone. I figured it would be a great time to delve into a topic that's as unique as it is intriguing: the evolution, or paleontology, of weed. Modern weed, or marijuana, is the drug refined from the fruit, flower, or bud of one of three possible species of the cannabis genus. Cannabis is an annual, dioecious, flowering herb belonging to the Cannabaceae family of the Rosales order. The three possible species are Cannabis sativa, indica, and ruderalis, though the validity of these species is often in flux depending on the parameters used by any given group of researchers. I'm sure at least two of these species names may seem familiar because they are the source for the names of the two major weed strains smoked or eaten today. But what would happen if we turned back the clock on our funky green friend? How far does the evolutionary history of the cannabis plant go? Were dinosaurs getting high in the Cretaceous? Let's have a look. The oldest evidence of the type of cannabis plants we have today pushes back the genus's origins to Asia. Weed, one of the oldest cultivated plants, has a rich and vibrant history that dates back centuries. Our ancient history with weed. There are many ideas on how cannabis was domesticated. Of those ideas, there are two main hypotheses. It came from China, or it came from Central Asia. The Chinese origin comes from ancient written records, while the Central Asian origin uses the fact that Central Asia is a biodiversity hotspot for the plant today and in the past as a significant part of its argument. A 2017 paper by Tang Wenlong, Make Wagner, Dieter Demsk, Christian Leip, and Pavel Tarasov added archaeological evidence to test these hypotheses for the better origin spot and time for devil's lettuce. Greek historian and geographer Herodotus was among the first people to write down the use of cannabis to get high. He wrote about Scythians blazing it up back in the middle of the 5th century, 2,500 years ago for normies. Scythian was a catch-all term back then for nomadic folks living from current-day Ukraine to Central Asia. Something tells me they wouldn't have been called barbarians by different groups of Greeks throughout the ages. Herodotus' writings were proven by archaeological evidence in the form of 2,500-year-old heavily decayed cannabis bits and pieces in bowls or bags in the Pazyryk frozen tombs and burial sites at Yonghai. Herodotus wasn't the only one to write about stoners, though. Some Chinese poems discuss cannabis and how to grow it, dating back to 2,600 years ago. As stated by Long et al. 2017, all of these written references to weed at around the same time suggest the plant, its cultivation, and use had been around for much longer. How much longer has been proven thanks to preserved grains of pollen and fruit, which have been carbon dated to around 8,000 years ago across Eurasia. Long et al. 2017 write that they think there is so little weed evidence in Asia at or older than 8,000 years ago because of human bias rather than fossil and subfossil record bias. That is, Europe has been studied a lot more than Asia overall, so of course there would be more records of the cannabis there. On top of that, there is a labeling bias when it comes to cannabis, thanks to its long and winding taxonomic history, a history I won't go in depth on here. In short though, the cannabis genus has been put into all sorts of plant groups over the centuries, and pollen from its close relative Humulus, the hop plant, has been variously lumped or split from cannabis. With all that considered, Long et al. 2017 think the best explanation for the origin and cultivation of cannabis is that it originates in multiple regions, presumably at various times or simultaneously. Weed evolution. Now, we know the tentative starting point for our involvement with cannabis. That is how we came to the versions of the plants we have today, but that is not when the plant first evolved. We must turn back the clock much further to understand where it came from. Let's keep rolling. Cannabis is a flowering plant, an angiosperm. These plants are relatively new to the world's ecosystems, having evolved from gymnosperm plants more than 140 million years ago. That doesn't seem like a new plant, but it's still just a baby group in the vast context of deep time. I use the term appeared because the oldest evidence for flowering plants comes from pollen and body fossils that appear abruptly in the fossil record around the 140 to 130 million year mark. Molecular dating, the process of determining when organisms diverged with the help of DNA and fossil evidence, suggests that ancient angiosperms diverged from the gymnosperm plants in the late Devonian, which gives a new meaning to it's 420 somewhere. That's quite a history for which no fossils exist. This could mean there were tons of weird flowering plants up until the time they appeared in the fossil record, or it could mean they remained super small, insignificant parts of the world's flora until the Cretaceous. There have been some claims of fossil flowers from before the Cretaceous period, but none of those claims have been widely accepted and many have some issues. A 2007 study by Moore et al. Used genomes to estimate that a handful of the major living flowering plant groups diverged about 140 million years ago, which includes the eudicots, a group we must focus on. A 2010 study by Michael Moore, Pamela Soltis, Charles Bell, J. Gordon Burleigh, and Douglas Soltis used phylogenetic and molecular dating analyses to understand further when the eudicot group Pentapetalae, which contains around 70% of all angiosperms, diverged from the other flowering plants. They found that this most likely occurred around 116 to 113 million years ago, with the Gonerales being a sister group. Within as little as 1 million years from this divergence, the Pentapetalae group began to diversify further into many new groups, including the Superrosids, Superasterids, and the Delaniaceae, a process that took as little as 5 million years. Now that we've figured this out, we need to focus on the Superrosids, a group that contains the Saxifragales and the Rosids. Can you smell where we're going? The Rosids are another group of living flowering plants, and they currently contain about 70,000 species worldwide. A 2009 paper by Heng-Chang Wang and colleagues found that the Rosids originated about 115 to 93 million years ago, quickly evolving from the Fabidae and Malvidae groups. The Fabidae diverged between 112 and 91 million years ago. It was not long before many more groups diverged from the Fabidae, including the Fabales and Rosales. The Rosales continued to diverge and evolve during the beginning of the late Cretaceous epoch, splitting off into the Rosaceae and two groups, one that split into a group containing the buckhorns, oleasters, barbea, and drachma, and a second that split into the Omaceae, or elms and zelkovas, and the group we are looking for. This group contains the Cannabaceae and the group linking Moraceae to the Urticaceae, or the figs and nettles. It took me a while to get here because of just how massive plant families are and how fast they evolve, plus the literature is a little weird on specifics, but we got there eventually. According to the 2019 work of Zhang Zhujin and friends, the oldest bit of evidence for the Cannabaceae group comes in the form of pollen lodged in amber from Borneo. The amber and pollen have been dated to around 94 to 90 million years ago. Considering the overlap in estimated divergence times and the other groups from which Cannabaceae evolved, I wouldn't be surprised if the groups in between Fabidae and Cannabaceae were diverging within a handful of millions of years. This is because the 2019 research group inferred that Cannabaceae originated sometime close to the oldest amberized pollen specimen. This, therefore, also means that the entire Cannabaceae family evolved in Asia, just as the living Cannabis genus did. They really love the northern hemisphere tropics. Before we go back to weed, let's quickly explore the other oddities found within the Cannabaceae. So, the oldest proof of Cannabaceae is pollen from the late Cretaceous. But are there any body fossils of these plants from the time of the dinosaurs? Yup. As part of the quietly failed Saurian video game project, one of the plant guys, Jake, brought up some images of Cannabaceae fossils from the Hell Creek Formation. Not to be a buzzkill, but none of these plants are from the Cannabis genus, so the answer to the smoking question of did dinos get high is a resounding no. Well, it's a no to did dinosaurs get high on weed anyway. I'm damn certain there were other psychoactive substances dinosaurs were getting into over their 100 million year reign. Though some of these leaf fossils do look relatively cannabis-like with outstretched pointy bladed leaves, true cannabis plants would not evolve until many tens of millions of years after the space rock incident of 66 MYA. Cannabaceae is more diverse than just cannabis. It includes 10 genera that originated and diversified extremely quickly across the northern hemisphere from the late Cretaceous to the early Cenozoic. No dirty space rock nor hot gassy earth cracks could tame them. The oldest of the Cannabaceae is the Aphananth genus, with only 5 evergreen tree species alive today. These guys' oldest fossil leaf evidence are specimens from Cretaceous Germany 72 to 66 million years ago. The next younger genus is Humulus, the closest relative of cannabis, which is known today as hops. The oldest fossil evidence of Humulus was described in 2002 by paleobotanist Kirk Johnson and comes from the Hell Creek and Lower Fort Union formations in the western Dakotas. That's about 70.6 to 65.5 million years ago. These are the specimens used in Saurian. The next younger genus is Celtis, which is known today as hackberries. The oldest fossil specimens come from Russia and the western US, and date to between 64 and 56 million years ago. The blue sandalwood of the Pteroceltis genus has fossils dating to the Eocene. There are also the deciduous trees of the Geoneria genus, dating back to the Oligocene of Germany, 33 to 23 million years ago. There are the thorny elms of Chaetachmi, the yellow fruit-bearing Lozanella, and the Trema plants of the Trema genus. Pollen is a lot easier to come by in the fossil record. This is because pollen is incredibly tiny, making it way easier for it to become fossilized. It also makes it easier for a lot of it to become fossilized. The same pretty much goes for microscopic or near microscopic shells. It's a good thing that pollen from different plants have different characteristics so they can be told apart. So when it comes to the Cannabis genus, the oldest pollen fossil dates to the Miocene epoch of northwestern China, about 19.6 million years ago. Interestingly enough, leaf fossils from the genus push it further back than pollen can. It's a rare instance of a reverse Uno. Body fossils of plants are harder to come by because plants like to decay away to nothing pretty easily. They don't have internal hard parts, like bones, that can become easily mineralized when buried. Many do, of course, have their own version of hard parts: bark, cambium, sapwood, heartwood, and pith, which become permineralized and/or replaced. That's what petrified wood is. Leaves and other soft parts don't have it so easy. As such, fossilized imprints of leaves or carbonized fossils of cannabis are quite rare. The oldest known instance of non-pollen cannabis fossils are those described in 1883 as Cannabis oligosenica. These German fossils were never dated, and no good stratigraphic data is provided in this publication. However, many modern scholars think the species name must refer to the general timing the fossils were assumed to belong to, the Oligocene epoch, 33 to 23 million years ago. The other best record of non-pollen cannabis fossils comes from the Bulgarian paleobotanist Emanuel Palomarev. In 1982, he described some fossil cannabis seeds from the late Miocene of Bulgaria about 7 to 5 million years ago. Thanks to molecular dating combined with the oldest known fossil cannabis pollen, the origin of cannabis can be stretched back to the mid-Oligocene epoch, 27.8 million years ago, when it diverged from Humulus and began evolving its unique psychoactive buds across the Tibetan Plateau. This joint effort got stale, leaving cannabis without buzz. It had enough of being a boring, bitterly zesty little artichoke clone and began experimenting with sticky rickies. According to the 2019 work of John McPartland, William Hegman, and Tengwen Long, cannabis moved westward from the Tibetan Plateau after the 19.6 million year old pollen data point in order for there to be that Bulgarian seed fossil at 7.3 to 5.3 million years ago. It also simultaneously crept eastward until it was present throughout Asia by the Pleistocene epoch, 2.5 million to 11,700 years ago. Can animals eat it? Can we eat it? Did extinct animals eat it? Now comes the fun question. Could prehistoric animals that lived alongside the prehistoric weed have gotten high off of it? This seemingly simple question has a three-part answer. So let's begin. Humans are animals, but since all animals tend to be different, we also react differently to the plant than other critters. Let's start with who we know best, us. Can we eat the raw weed buds or flowers? Technically, yes. There aren't any known toxic substances in cannabis buds, so nothing horrible or permanent will likely happen if you do. However, what would happen if you did? As it turns out, not much. The most commonly known chemical fact about weed is that it's the THC chemical that is doing all the heavy lifting in getting you where you need to go. However, reality is a little more complex. Raw cannabis is stuffed full of carboxylic acid under the label of THCA. These don't get you high, as they are not THC. However, a special process can turn these acids into the cannabinoid chemicals stoners love. That process goes by the name of decarboxylation. Those who have spent any amount of time around Latin prefixes and roots may surmise what this term means. You have to detach something, probably the carboxyl part of the word, from the carboxylic acid that makes up the THCA thing, right? That's correct, bud. Thanks for playing. Decarboxylation is a chemical reaction that peels off a carboxyl group from a chemical that has one of those attached to it, resulting in the production of everyone's favorite greenhouse gas, CO2. However, in this instance, that turns THCA into THC proper, providing you with all the cannabinoids you want. The thing that gets this chemical reaction going is simply a large amount of heat. Heat that is far above our or most living things' body temperatures. So, you vaporize, smoke, bake, or cook the bud at 200 degrees Fahrenheit or more. The higher the temperature, the less time the flower needs to cook. Obviously, burning the stuff just turns it into tasty smoke to inhale. Okay, so now we know how to turn raw weed into psychoactive weed. So why would anyone want to eat it straight up? Well, it has some nutritional value. Truly raw weed, straight from the plant, is loaded with some vitamins and minerals you'd find in many leafy greens, such as vitamin K and C, plus calcium, potassium, iron, zinc, and more. Cannabis also has some good fiber stuffed in there. Apparently, cannabis has been shown to have some therapeutic effects, such as anti-inflammation, promotion of cell function, and some antioxidant stuff. I personally still wouldn't go out of my way to eat it, plus I'm not a doctor, so I would simply just not do that. Aside from hemp seeds and oils though, that stuff is bomb. To be blunt, there is a very small possibility that people who are extremely sensitive to weed may have some form of reaction to consuming raw bud. There are reports out there, even if they don't totally make sense considering all I've gone through at this point. This may be from bud that you buy at the dispensary. Those buds are usually dried and heat treated, so that some THC may have been activated. The bud right off the plant is moist and is still just THCA. There are also plenty of reports of pets coming into vet offices sick off weed. However, as far as I can find, it seems that most of these instances are edibles rather than the actual plant itself. Every animal group is different, so the plant may react in their bodies differently than it does in ours. But considering body temperatures cannot go above a certain temperature before denaturing and cell death, I really don't think that the majority of animals will ever get perceptively high from munching on some devil's lettuce, aside from the heat-treated bud exception, of course. So, how does it affect other animals? Most animals don't eat marijuana. The psychoactive chemicals and crystals formed outside the leaves or buds are defensive mechanisms against herbivores. Animals will eat them occasionally, but they usually don't get stoned because of how stomach acid reacts with the plant. However, plenty of insects love this stuff. The typical pests of cannabis plants are the typical pests that eat all other crops: ants, birds, grasshoppers, gophers, aphids, slugs, snails, mites, and caterpillars. They'll variously eat the roots, seeds, leaves, and flowers, or just do physical damage to the plants. I won't leave you high and dry. Remember like 10 minutes ago when I said dinos couldn't get high? This was because cannabis didn't exist yet. But interestingly, hops did. Unlike cannabis, where you need to heat the flower up to get the effects, hops can have an effect just by ingesting it. The fruits or flowers are very strongly flavored, which is why they are usually added to beer brews before the whole mix is boiled. You know, for that zesty, bitter flavor. It's certainly an acquired taste, that's for sure. Anyway, it seems that the majority of living vertebrate animals leave hops plants alone. The bitterness we like is, as in most plants, a defense mechanism to deter animals from eating it. When you eat them, aside from the weird taste, the flower will also sedate you, depending on the type, of course. Considering that most living animals avoid the plant, I'm betting most herbivorous dinosaurs did so as well. That's assuming the Cretaceous hops plants even had the same type of flowers as modern ones do. But just because animals avoid it doesn't mean some didn't try some. I'm now imagining a Triceratops or some Titanosaur chowing down on some hops and then lying around zoned out being all chill. Take me back. The same pretty much goes for the ancient animals that lived alongside cannabis plants as they evolved away from Humulus during the early Cenozoic. I'm sure some hapless Calicothere or Entelodont slammed down some weed and hops and ended up feeling a little loopy. Maybe some herbivores in a drought-stricken area consumed sun-dried cannabis buds that were just hot enough to activate some THC. Or perhaps forest fires in certain areas got Gigantopithecus high. Interestingly, modern elephants have been observed smoking. Now, this phenomenon has baffled experts, mostly because it could be that the animal is literally inhaling the smoke from the burning ember, or it could be using the smoke to ward off insects from its body, or it's just being a goof and messing around with some charcoal. I wouldn't put it past the intelligence of elephants to know what smoke is and how it works, though. And if we stretch that back in time, voila, weed-smoking elephants of the distant past. That's pretty much all I could find about the ancient history of weed. There's a lot more information out there about our ancient history with the plant, but I wanted to take a broader, deep time perspective with this. It seems no one else has explored the fossil record of this crop here before, so hopefully this may spark some more interest. Happy 420 everyone, smoke 'em if you got 'em. I'll THC you later. For more interesting stories about nature, the history of life, or what goes bump in the night, subscribe, like this video, drop a comment in the comment section below, and hit the bell icon to stay in the know with everything Edge. Thanks for watching.